In today's episode, we are diving into the transformative role of data and AI in modern business with none other than Mike Burke, a seasoned tech leader whose insights on data culture and innovation are reshaping how companies operate in a digital age. Mike brings a wealth of experience in data driven strategy and leadership, making him the perfect guest to explore the ever evolving landscape of technology. We will unpack the essentials of building a strong data culture, examine the role of data driven decision making in organizational growth, and discuss the critical skills leaders need to navigate the rapid pace of tech advancements. Mike will also share his vision on where AI and big data are heading, along with some of the emerging tools and trends he believes will define the future. Whether you are a tech enthusiast, business leader, or just curious about the future, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Mateo, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Mike, let's start with the basics. Can you share a little bit about your journey in technology? What inspired you to enter this field, and what are some of the key moments that shaped your career?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I actually grew up without internet or television in a rural Massachusetts. And I remember the day my dad brought home an old IBM. This isn't a color screen or anything. This is the one with the green screen that you had to code in terminal. Um, and just being fascinated by it, right? It was a world that I had never had any exposure to. And nights and weekends, I would get time on the computer when it wasn't being used for work or business. And I actually learned to code as a kid by writing code on paper. And then on those nights and weekends, I would quickly transcribe it to the computer and compile it to see if I had written the right code or not. So, really kind of limited time, but a lot of fun. Speed up my career. When I was 22, I got my first corporate or professional job at a web and data company called Fuzz Productions. They were kind of at the peak of the mobile app development boom and a wild tech startup, right? This is early tech days. We were designing apps for people like Jay-Z and, going to these crazy tech parties. It was the coolest job I'd ever had, I think, and definitely a really cool first job for sure. Moving forward, I decided that I wanted to start my own company and started a company called Always Play. At that point, I had started to get a little curious with data. I would say that what we have today, like data as a product and data-driven development, didn't really exist back then, at least not at the level that I was. And so learning things like Google Analytics and getting better and smarter at SEO optimization was how I got my foothold into data. Always Play was a web design and development company that did a lot more SEO and analytics. Grew that to a small team of 5 people, developed really customized, high-quality websites. And then was continuing to do that for a couple of years, and then had been following this product LastPass, password manager. And I just thought that password managers were kind of the future of managing credentials, and knew and was kind of interested in security at that point. Had been talking with the founder and giving a lot of insights on features that I thought they should develop. And then when they got acquired by a company called LogMeIn in Boston, I knew that was my chance. I said, I have to go join this company. Reached out to the founder and said, and the guys at LogMeIn and said, look, I really want to be a part of LastPass. I know it's a company based in Virginia. Can I join up? And joined on as employee number 3. LastPass was a rapidly growing company, right? We have millions of users. At our peak, we had 30 million users. And like any product, becoming more data-driven was something that needed to evolve with the startup, right? We were still kind of in a startup mode. Most of our decisions on what to build and what to do came from our community forums and feedback, which is still probably one of the best sources of decision making. But we needed to understand a lot more about our users. And being a small team, I was naturally kind of interested in data and started learning a lot more about machine learning and big data processing, and eventually stepped into this role of leading AI and ML at LogMeIn as the head of machine learning. After that, I've kind of jumped around a little bit. I went to a company called Reltio, which is a master data management company doing AI. And then my latest venture here is at Boston Venture Studio, where I was a partner and then a CTO, and now I'm an advisor, helping grow startups from 0 to 1. And that's been kind of a complete pivot in my career, and something that I was super excited about and really happy to learn how to build startups, from the ground up. So Boston Venture Studios was founded by Paul English. He co-founded Kayak. Um, and the idea is that we build 12 startups a year. They're all our own ideas. They're all built internally with our own teams. And it's just rapid development, launching products quickly and getting them out into the market and adapting as fast as possible.
I love your story. It's an amazing story. Um, you reminded me. So let's go back to that. First computer, the green screen, and you. Where were you learning the code? So you were learning how to code on your own, and then putting that on paper, and then putting that on the computer. But how? By books? I mean,
Books. I actually was the kid who went to the library and requested like technical books. Like libraries will buy books for you if you ask
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And so I was like, hey, can you buy these web development books? Can you buy these books on PHP was one of the languages I learned in Visual Basic. And I had to actually give them like the ISBN numbers because I had no idea what these things were at that point. So it was kind of fun. The web was still super early. The internet was a completely different thing than what it is today.
right.
Um, but an amazing opportunity. At that point we had dial-up, right? And it wasn't even 56K. It was like whatever it
Yeah.
was before that. The
All the
super
noises
slow.
and
Oh yeah, yep. I
yeah,
played that sound for one of my employees recently, and they didn't even know what it was. I was like, "How can you not know this sound? This is critical to the internet." Everybody had to go through that pain of getting
yes,
dropped and reconnecting and waiting
yes.
minutes to reconnect.
Yeah, and then your mom picking up the phone or whatever and getting
Yep,
you out of yeah.
exactly.
We are dating ourselves here, but it's good, it's good. um so Mike, data culture is many times cited as a foundation for modern organizations, right? But what is data culture? What makes a strong data culture, and why is it so critical today?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't have a data strategy in today's modern ecosystem, you're at a severe disadvantage, right? And I think that for most people, they understand that at this point. I think at the startup space, it's a little bit more unique because you don't have data as the same way that you do at a large enterprise. But to me, a data culture really starts with a foundation of alignment of people, right? What are the questions that your product wants to answer? What is it solving for your customers or your businesses? And then working backwards, right? And that alignment, even though it sounds simple, is really difficult to achieve, especially at large enterprises where everybody is kind of isolated in silos and they have their own priorities and KPIs. Gaining that alignment of we are driving towards X and this is how we're going to measure it. To me, that is what starts with a great data culture. Beneath that is all the things that I think there's many specialized products and people and consultants that talk about, which is actually doing that, right? Getting the data, transforming it, having a unified version of the truth that everybody's aligned against. What is your customer? What is your KPIs? You know, are you dealing with real-time decision making? Are you dealing with batch decision making? The uptime of all those systems. But to me, when you talk about culture, it's alignment, and then it's also talking about process of how do you ask questions within your business? How do you answer questions within your business? Um, and this data as a product really is what we've moved towards, has expanded from this role even when in my career, like 5 or 10 years ago, that was something where the data scientists and the data engineers and the analysts kind of did all that. And then they consolidated up a report, which was handed to executives. We've moved away from that model in many businesses where now everybody, heads of marketing, heads of sales, they're all um, proficient, or they should be proficient in answering and asking these questions themselves.
And so when we talk about that culture of alignment of what questions are we asking and how are we answering those questions, it really starts with the CEO, doesn't it? It really starts at the most highest level. If you don't have that sponsor, it will not work out. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, if you think about going back to even computers, right? Like when computers came in, it was like, what does it mean to be a company that's run on a computer or technology, right? You're creating this level of efficiencies that if you have somebody at the top who's guiding that vision and that mission of we're going to be a data-driven company and we're going to use data as a product to make decisions, um, you get a much more transparent guidance from everybody within the ecosystem. And I think that if you look at companies like Amazon is a great example. You can't build a feature and scale it up without data backing up your claims, right? That's going to get torn apart. And they even
Yeah.
have review boards that go in and will analyze, like, what are you doing? You know, how much have you improved the KPIs that you've claimed you're impacting? And it's not even just about having that data; it's about having data that is convincing, right? Because at the end of the day, like all of our data can be transformed to answer any question and make it look like something that is successful. But I think that having those open debates and saying, does this really answer the question? Are you really solving these pain points for this customer, or are other features or products impacting that? That's where it gets really complicated, and debate and discussion and expertise come into play.
Got it. And what are the pitfalls that companies typically face, right? Let's say, okay, yeah, we want to be data driven, and we are getting started, but what are the typical pitfalls that companies fall into?
I think that its structure is probably the biggest thing. Most of these companies didn't start with a data-driven mindset. It's evolved within the ecosystem. And so what happens is that you have these silos of information and expertise that start to emerge, and many times those are conflicting, right? You have the marketing team saying this is the definition of a customer and this is a successful customer, and then you have the sales team looking at something else.
Mm.
And without that alignment of structure, you start to form these silos, which create tension and competition, and kind of erode that transparency and alignment and quality that you're striving for as a business.
And there's a lot of definitions there, and even logic and semantics and a proper use of the English language, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, my background, I'm an attorney by background, right?
Yep.
And so an important part of many very complex agreements are definitions, right? Because if you
Yep.
don't have those definitions, then everyone will think differently about a similar concept, right? How does that work in the data world? And is there a champion, like a chief data officer, that will be the one making sure that those definitions are correct? Or is that a something that needs to come with the culture of the organization itself? And you know,
Yeah. I mean, look, there are so many variables in these questions that if you're a large enterprise company, it's more about maintaining a definition or guidance on a definition than it is defining, right? I think
okay,
that in the ideal world, you have five people get into a room and they say, this is the definition of retention, or this is a successful company or customer, and they agree on it and they move forward, right? But in reality, what happens is that you've got these ecosystems where there just isn't that communication, and that alignment is really difficult because success and the findings of these different departments are driven by completely different metrics. So answering something as simple as what is a successful customer is a really challenging problem that is constantly evolving and requires a lot of maintenance. So I think that's where a chief data officer or a champion comes in and says, I'm going to work across departments to make sure that we maintain alignment on these definitions. And the executive team is bought into that. You've got your executive sponsors, and everybody kind of pushes back when there's something that is misaligned from that definition.
right.
Um,
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, AI, and the future. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI in the coming years, especially as it relates to your field data and decision making?
Man, I think that there are so many opportunities coming. And even though we are in a hype cycle right now, and I think that for large language models, we are at the peak of that hype cycle. And as somebody who loves AI, I see that it's clear, right? I mean, I don't believe that we are anywhere close to general intelligence. I think that we are moving in the right direction, and maybe we can get there in 5 to 10 years if the right technology becomes available. But we still have a long way to go. Where I see the biggest advantages are things on the edge. And when I say on the edge, what I mean is on device,
Yeah.
on your IoT, on your systems, where they can actually make decisions that don't need to go back to a centralized computer.
Right.
And large language models will play a big role in that. Reinforcement learning will play a big role in that. And I think the combination of a lot of these different types of models working together in an ecosystem that is local and not remote is going to be a huge area of opportunity. And you're already seeing it start to come out, right? Apple now has LLMs on device. A lot of these customers, and even laptops, right? I mean, I don't know if you've tried it or not, but you can deploy a large language model on your laptop that works and has the power of, a subset of the internet at your fingertips in under 7 GB of space, right? That's incredible. We've never had technology like that to date. So what people are going to do with that, how they're going to utilize it, I think there's a lot of opportunity, areas and specific verticals, Department of Defense, you're going to see a lot more come out of that. There already is a lot. I think in the medical device space, you'll see a lot coming. Anything that involves a sensor or is involved in security, you'll see a lot more analysis. I mean, think about if you have a security system, right, like a Ring or one of these camera devices, you get notifications for everything. Like the leaves blow at my house and I get a Ring notification saying like something's at your door, right? That's going to change. You're going to have localized processing that understands what I care about and what I need to be alerted about.
So do you think it's what you're saying is very interesting, but we keep hearing, for example, Sam Altman, he was saying that what excites him the most about next year is getting closer to AGI, right?
Yeah.
Is that marketing? Do they know that it's farther away from where it is, and they just love the hype that creates, or are they closer to something that we don't know?
I mean, I think that we're constantly moving closer, right? If you look at ChatGPT, it's an order of magnitude better than what it was even 3 years ago, right? But if you look at the rate of compute power that's being produced, it's not growing at the same speed. So
Right.
sure, maybe will there be some models that are very, very expensive to run that could do certain tasks pretty well? Yeah, sure. Do I think that we're at a point where you're going to see, AI taking over the workforce? No. I think that what you're going to see is it being an additive tool that drastically increases the efficiency of every employee and therefore allows us to do more with less.
And random question, right? We keep computing keeps going from centralized to edge computing, right? It's
Yeah.
like ebbs and flows, right? With the LLMs and OpenAI and everything, we seemed to be going more to a centralized. And what you're saying is super interesting because essentially what you're saying is the next phase is on the edge, right? It's going back to the edge and deploying
Yep.
there and using that computing power and everything that we can get there. When you look at history from that moment that you are working with the green, screen, do you see that ebb and flow, and do you think that in the future it will continue going back and forth between more centralized and more on the edge?
Absolutely. I mean, look, as compute power becomes more affordable, you're able to do more locally, right?
Right.
I mean, I remember, when I was learning animation years ago, you had to, if you wanted to do anything powerful, you had to send it off to a centralized service for processing. Now we can do almost everything on our computer and get a lot further in that ecosystem. The same thing holds true for LLMs and any other technology. And, you look at your Amazon Alexas and some of your smart devices and what they can do locally, even though they're using centralized services, it's a world of difference of what it was 10 years ago, right?
Right.
So that ebb and flow, I think, is more technology will likely always lead on a centralized technology stack, and then it will, spread out as processing power becomes more affordable and energy rates become more affordable and things consume less energy. I think that's where all of this is driving from. And you'll see a lot more of it, I think, definitely in the coming years of this edge technology.
Is there any part of AI that scares you? Do you ever feel scared, or you don't really go there?
I mean, look, I think that the doomsday kind of view of AI, maybe it will happen someday. I'm not going to say that it wouldn't because I'm not I can't forecast that far ahead, but
Right.
I'm not worried about it. I think that we as humans generally produce things for good and to improve our lives. And the moment that they start to harm us, we're going to create policies and regulations that prevent them from doing that kind of damage. And you're already seeing it, right, with a lot of the presidential elections and other ways where AI can be used to generate massive amounts of content, more content than we've ever seen before in the history of the internet. I think the bigger question and the bigger concern is the internet is a living organism generated by people, right? And the content on that has been immensely rich because it's been generated by people. But as we start to generate more content using machines, how does that impact the quality of the internet?
Yeah.
And that's a question that I'm much more concerned about because these machines won't even be able to get better if data isn't being produced by humans and high quality data isn't being produced by humans. So I think that's the bigger concern for getting closer to general intelligence and also with large language models in general is how do we maintain the quality of collecting good data to drive these decisions?
Yeah. Yeah. I keep thinking about that, and I keep thinking about what it means to be original in content creation, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're also seeing so many people just it's like a fancier cut and paste, right? Copy and
Yep.
paste, basically. Um, let's talk about leadership a little bit. In the tech industry, how do you approach leadership, especially with guiding people in such a fast changing field?
Yeah. I mean, I know this is kind of a cliche word, but I think it's authenticity. Like you have to lead with your opinions, knowing your biases, and you have to be a good listener, right? You're at the end of the day, as you move up in leadership, you are listening to those around you more than you are directing. And I think it's a very it's a misconception that when you lead, you are leading, at least from my perspective, that you're leading with your own opinions and your own direction. You're really more of a moderator, leaning on the experts within your ecosystem to drive the best decision forward for that time. And honestly, in my role, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing is listening to engineers, listening to product people and marketing people, and understanding, based on all of these priorities, how can we optimize things to move forward the fastest?
I love it. What do you like? You've been leading people for a long time now, and in different ways and shapes, right? And now with the startups, also, you are creating new things all the time. Um, what's the part about leadership that you enjoy the most?
I mean, I can't. I am so happy when I see somebody who started off maybe with some sort of challenges or some blockers in their career and unblocking them and watching them grow. Like, that one engineer that's incredibly smart and gifted at solving problems, but terrible at communication. And you help teach them the skills to communicate better and express themselves in a way that they can create a bigger impact. That to me is like 100% the most exciting thing. I think also when you see the people around you become smarter than you, the interns that started off with a very limited amount of knowledge, and then all of a sudden they're guiding you on something 3 years down the line and saying, no, 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 this is how you should do it. Like that's incredible, right? To see that journey and be part of that process. And to me, I mean, all leadership is helping guide that process as a company and create and maintaining the health of that ecosystem, move up and grow within the organization, and ultimately take on those leadership roles.
I love it. Um, going back a little bit to big data, right? It's been a buzzword for some time now. How do you think it has evolved, and what are some of the misconceptions people still have about it?
I mean, the same problems that we've had with data have not gone away. And I think that despite AI, despite compute power like being so much greater, we are still collecting a lot of crappy data, right? And the quality of data is something that, it's like anything else. Like I like to always use the reference of your body, right? It doesn't matter how hard you're working out if you're eating chips every day for breakfast, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The same thing with your data ecosystem. Like you have to be diligent. You have to be mindful of what you're collecting, how much you're spending, and what problems and questions you're answering with that. I think a lot of people, when they start off during this journey, especially leaders that don't have a data background, they say, we're just going to collect everything. And they end up building this swamp of data because they're worried that they might not be able to answer questions in the future. So they
right.
collect all this data. It's unorganized, it's unstructured, there's no experts, there's no dissemination of knowledge. And you just get left with this clunky system that nobody can go back and maintain. It's burning a lot of money and resources. So to me, it's just like taking care of yourself and maintaining your fitness and your health. It's like you have to be conscious of what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, and what you're going to do with it, and how that's driving value.
Are those some of the first steps that anyone is hearing us and they want to become more data driven? Are those the first crucial steps that they should keep in mind?
I think that the first step you should do if your company is new to collecting data, or even if they already started and you're trying to get into the environment or the ecosystem, start small. Start with a targeted question that you need to answer. Maybe it's one feature within the ecosystem that you're responsible for. And you say, you know what? I have a hypothesis of how this feature I'm building is going to impact our business. And start working backwards. Like, this is what I'm trying to solve for. This is how it's going to create value for our customers. What data do I need to collect to answer this question? And what you'll likely find, I mean, from my experience at least, is the first time you go through that, you think you've answered the question and you collect that data, and then you realize that you made a ton of assumptions on how you were creating value. And you're almost never answering what you think you are by collecting that data. So
Right.
it's an iterative cycle that involves talking to customers. It involves the personal aspect of reaching out and understanding, what is the impact of what I'm creating and how is it impacting you and driving value. A great example of this was at LastPass. We had this adoption of really technical users right at the beginning. Nobody, your mom or your dad is not going to use LastPass. They didn't even understand password hygiene at that point. And we had kind of two cohorts that we analyzed in our data set. One was this highly technical user base, and the other were these non-technical people that were really kind of using it in simple use cases. And we couldn't understand where this growing population was coming from. We thought maybe they were referrals from friends and family. And what we found out after talking to them was every one of these users had, or most of them, had been impacted by identity theft. And so it was that pain of getting their passwords taken over and their, social security numbers taken over, or, their credit cards charged, that caused them to seek better methods to protect themselves. And we would have never learned that from the data that we had available to us at LastPass. We only learned that by going off and talking to them. And then
Right.
after we talked to them, there was this iterative process of like, okay, well, let's monitor these people and see how we can build, a better and more secure and more manageable system for them. And maybe part of that is protecting them with identity theft prevention tools, right? So I think that's kind of the learning process that we would go through. And, I think it's really common for people who work in the data space, in the AI space, to kind of huddle down and say, I can make any decision I need to based on the data in front of me. And it almost is never the case. Like, it's always about reaching out to people, interacting with people, and kind of understanding their stories that helps align what you're seeing in the data.
I love it. I many times when working with my team and by any chance know where you are, but when we are showing data, right, what I always try to tell the team is there's no data without story and no story without data, right? I mean, what's the
Yeah.
story behind the data that you're showing me? What are, how did you confirm it? And what you're saying about talking to customers, I love it because it gives you a different perspective and you're iterating on really understanding what's really the story behind what you're trying to see. Um, what so of course there's AI, right? But are there any emerging tech trends or tools that you're excited about right now?
I am, and I'm not by any means an expert on this, but I am super excited about quantum computing,
Mhm.
just because I think that it's going to unlock a lot of new technology in the world, and it's going to solve a lot of these problems that we have been working on for years and just haven't had the right ecosystems and traditional compute to answer those questions. So that's kind of my nerdy focus, I would say, and I'm interested in. I'm also really excited about the opportunities of VR. I think we're still a ways away from true VR. Um, but once we get to that point where we really have pixel density in screens, so it feels like you're in a real reality, I think you're going to see
Right.
a lot of new ways that we use technology emerge that we have not even dreamed of yet. Um, and I know that, I was years ago, got the Google Glass, was like super excited about augmented reality. And it's been unfortunate for me that it hasn't taken hold, but I see so much potential, right? In the large enterprise space, like doing diagnostics on machines was one that I was really excited about with augmented reality. Um, and I think that even for things like gaming or simulation or training, you know, how can we create more immersive experiences with technology? If you look at what we have today, we've got all this amazing compute, we have all this amazing AI, but we look into, a two-dimensional screen, and that's what we're using. And how can we create more interactive experiences? I'm
Right.
super excited about that for the future.
It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive, and it's hard to stay up to date, right? And
Yeah.
there are a few things going on that it's just amazing. So one final question to you, Mike. Looking ahead, for anyone that's listening, what will be your advice to tech professionals wanting to remain relevant and thrive? Uh, with AI, big data, and then as those continue to reshape our world.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that AI and big data have become so broad and so big, right? It's going to be used in every facet of your life. And so what I would recommend is start to specialize, like understand the core technologies, but then find that thing that you are super passionate about. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's just started his first internship, and he's trying to understand, the job market's really competitive right now. He's struggling to kind of find his way in this larger ecosystem after graduating with a CF degree. And I said, the thing that is going to separate um, great talent from everyone else is how passionate you are about the thing that you're working on.
Right.
And that has to be specialized. Now, you can't just be a data scientist or a data engineer. You have to be a data engineer in something you really care about, that you wake up every day and you'd be doing on the weekend, even if you didn't get paid. And so I think that even as professionals and experts in the field who are more senior, like, what is that thing that motivates you to get up every day and get to work? And what's that thing that you're reading about on the weekend just because you want to learn about it? Follow that, like chase that, because there will be, unlimited opportunities right now with AI and new technology and IoT and edge computing that are going to emerge out of that. So if you're willing to take the risk and chase that dream, I would say now is the right time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Mike, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. And I hope that we get to do it sometime again in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me on the show. Thank you.